Good morning. It's sunny and a bit warmer here in Dallas, Texas. I'm here with the great Wada'a Fahel'a, founder of the LocVerse and a global content tech consultant at this moment. We also know her from Zendesk in the past, where she was senior director of global engagement, and from Harley Davidson, one of my favorite motorcycle brands, where she was localization manager. I'm just giving the broad highlights. Why don't you flesh that out for us a little bit more and give us your background so people can know you a little bit better?
Hi, Stefan. Thank you for having me. Well, thanks for the introduction. I've been in this business for about 20 years now. And as you mentioned, I spent most of my career on the buyer side of the business, leading localization, operations, and strategies for iconic brands like Harley Davidson Motor Company, Xerox, and also Zendesk. About a year ago, I decided to transition to full-time consulting, and I founded LocVerse, and I wish I started sooner, to be honest. So I help, basically in a nutshell, I support clients and vendors in their localization journey in an AI charged environment.
Awesome. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you a little bit more is because you have strong opinions about who owns the global meaning at this point, and about redesigning localization's power structures. So let's get started on that right away and talk about centralization versus decentralization in localization, and whether that's even the right question, we should say. So when companies say we're decentralized, what do they usually mean in practice?
Well, it could be in multiple things, really. It could be the content is decentralized at the functional level. So you could be under the same org. Let's say the CMO organization, you have lifecycle marketing, engagement marketing, digital, but the content is siloed. So the workflows are not shared, the localization practices are not shared, the platforms are not shared. And then you have the regional decentralization, and this is where HQ owns the master copies or the original copy, and then the regions go on their own, basically, in terms of developing content and localizing. So the idea of decentralization being presented as the content localization is spread between various vendors and platform is not really accurate, because decentralization could take various shapes and sizes depending on the business needs.
Yeah. And when we're talking about decentralization, of course, what parts of localization should never be decentralized, even with AI in place, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. I would say tech, because when all else fails, you can fall back on tech. And what I mean by that, let's say as a localization leader on the buyer side of the business, you have governance over technology, but you use multiple vendors and multiple LSPs, SLVs, or maybe various platforms, but they're governed by a single technology or a single environment. If you have a problem with a vendor or a platform, you can fall back on the technology to avoid disrupting operations until this vendor or this workflow is back on track. So I would say if it's possible to not decentralize technology, that would be a good safety net for companies.
Where does decentralization generally outperform centralized models today, and how has that changed over time?
Surprisingly, decentralization outperforms with when you have a young group of people leading it.
Mm.
And it's an interesting statement, I know, but what I've observed, managing younger teams and also working with a younger group of clients, is that the next generation and the younger generation favor freedom. They want the flexibility to select the right workflow, the right tool, the right vendor, and switch gears when they want to. And decentralization bring that flexibility to them. Now, there are a few tools out there that allow this governed flexibility, because the younger teams do realize at the end of the day that they also need governance. They want everything. They want flexibility and they want governance and cost savings and what have
Do
you.
they want the responsibility too?
They want exactly, but they don't want to be responsible for the decision.
If it goes wrong, they don't want the responsibility, I'm guessing.
Yes. Let's say they want the credit, but the accountability is
Not
a
so
question mark.
pleasurable, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting that decentralization works with an audience better than another.
Yeah. What signals tell you a company is decentralizing responsibility instead of decision making?
When the budget is decentralized, you'll know. And it's a smart move, because when a localization team or a group of people in an organization decide to own the workflow and the strategy and the operations and the vendor selection and relationships, but allow the regions and the various functions to cross-charge and pay for their own localization projects, that's a defaulting responsibility, but still owning the decision. So it's a smart move, and it's flexible, and it's shared responsibility, because no one can claim that the spend is high in that case. The localization spend is high because it's spread over various cost centers and is being cross-charged.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes that fast scaling startups repeat from large enterprises?
Oh gosh. We could spend hours talking about this topic.
Hey, unload. We're here to listen, Wada.
Well, let me think of what's top of mind. I would say overhiring. Startups want to move fast, so they end up hiring for various positions that end up being redundant after a certain period of time, and this is when the reorgs start. Launching 25 initiatives at the same time. Enterprises can afford the problems with 25 initiatives, but startups can't. And when you spread your team very thin, things start to break. So that's a learning curve right there. And what else? I would say vanity metrics, or what I like to call dashboard theater. So lots of nice data, lots of nice dashboards, but no decision making. More of a let's submit but not change behavior.
What are the metrics? What are the metrics that are really important in your mind, and what are some of the more vanity oriented metrics? Because I think that's a really interesting topic.
Very good question. So the vanity-oriented metrics are the ones that are strictly localization related. Oh, we were able to reduce turnaround time or cost per word by X over this period of time. The leadership on the buyer side of the business is not interested in any of that. They want to know if the website, the traffic to a certain website in a certain market has been doing well. They want to know if they're avoiding fines in a certain market because of localization. Practical examples, practical metrics that doesn't only reflect the overall health of the localization program, but how it's impacting growth and the go-to-market strategy. And unfortunately, in startups, I don't think they have the time or the professional maturity to get to that level or to realize these needs fast enough. And it's not always their fault, because experience comes with age and with time too. So we cannot really blame. They have to go through it. We've all been through it, right? Until you reach a certain level when you can read the room, understand your audience, and select metrics that really click with their pain points and daily business practices.
So when you come into an organization as a global content consultant, do you walk in as a referee? How do you frame this debate without turning it into a turf war?
Well, I think you mean centralization versus decentralization. Yeah, I think it turns into a war when you position it as either or. It really isn't. They're swim lanes. There are pros and cons to decentralization and centralization, and it all boils down to the business needs, to the company business needs. So in some cases, I do recommend decentralization or governed decentralization because you still need tech and platforms and workflows. And in some cases, centralization works perfectly, especially in a manufacturing environment where you set up a system, you clone it, and then it's paint by number.
Very interesting. What are the most prevalent changes to roles and org charts in organizations, and specifically to the roles that touch on global content in particular?
Yeah, things are changing quite a bit. We're seeing new roles, and I think there's enough data online and enough job descriptions on job boards to see the new roles that are surfacing in localization. But what I'm seeing, what I'm observing with my clients is the mid-management layer is impacted and it's changing significantly because coordination is being automated. A lot of tasks at the mid-managements are now being automated. So you have the best managers becoming system designers, capability builders. The AI team is shrinking. So instead of having a large AI and ML team, you have a solid platform with a nucleus governance, and then the AI workflows are embedded at the function level. Product, marketing, tech pubs, compliance, and so forth and so on. These are the things that come to mind at this point.
Another topic that I wanted to touch upon with you today is how AI has changed the buyer-vendor relationship more than pricing ever did, I think. And so let's discuss agencies and vendors and power shifts in this new ecosystem a little bit. In your opinion, how has AI altered what clients expect from agencies and localization currently?
Well, from a turnaround time perspective, in the past, there wasn't a specific percentage. It was the lines were a little bit blurry. Clients needed things faster, but they couldn't put their finger on what faster meant. But now we're seeing a trend where clients come to vendors and say, we expect you with AI to launch 6 times faster. Not twice, not 3 times faster, 6 times faster. And I believe that this is coming from C staff and E staff because they're following the trends of AI in general, not at the language level. And they have this expectation that time to market is achievable with AI 6 times faster. So the vendors are under a lot of pressure in that space. Also, moving or shifting gears in terms of roles. So, and I had the same experience when I led localization at Zendesk, because was around when AI took the industry by storm. And we had solid vendors, a solid vendor network. But with AI, we needed to change roles. So many vendors moved from heavy lifters to gatekeepers. We still needed them, but they were now the second set of eyes, focusing on this last mile of hyperlocal content instead of being the heavy lifters. So the expectations are shifting depending on the workflows and the business needs. Also, from a pricing perspective, there's a big noise around the pricing and how it should be packaged with various companies and various business needs. So the expectations are high and the capabilities are out there. Our vendors, I think the landscape of localization is solid. We have tons of capabilities and good workflows and good tools out there, but it all boils down with the differentiation and the narrative.
Yeah. And is there any room for agencies to negotiate on some of the demands, and also where are agencies still misreading the buyer signals in the current climate?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is pricing. I think some agencies, not all of them, are still considering the per word rate card. And we need to kill that. It has to evaporate, like poof, kind of a deal. We don't need a per word rate card anymore. The other thing, and it's a tough spot for vendors because they usually work with localization team on the client side of the business, and oftentimes they are brought in to support what their localization manager on the client side is doing and evangelize the same process to the leadership. We see this, we want you to come in as a consultant to showcase our leaders that we're doing the right thing, even if you disagree with us. And it's a tough spot because as a consultant or as a vendor, we have to walk in, we have to support the equivalent of the hiring manager, even if we don't agree with their strategy. So I think this is the signals that the vendors need to start acting on now. You could tell your relationship owner or hiring manager in a certain company that yes, we will support you all the way, we will present the fact, but for your eyes only, we think you can do things better in these areas. I think this builds credibility and trust and integrity that is currently not quite prevalent.
If I can follow up slightly on your initial point, because I'm interested in whether you have an opinion about this. This payment model discussion has been going on for decades now, and every time we try to get away from it, the answer of the skeptics is, what are we going to replace it with, and how do we justify the cost to the customer? What metric do you suggest that should be used to charge customers if we're not going to be charging by the word?
Well, tech versus services, because we have two different models there.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing a trend of kind of what I like to call a V2V alliances. So vendor to vendor partnership and alliance. The services company are realizing that they need to partner with a competitor, maybe, who have a strong tech, because they do not want to build tech, because by the time they build it, it will probably be obsolete. So why not partner with a tech company? And this is where pricing becomes a little bit tricky, because if your core service or selling point is still language translation, then yes, you need some sort of a per word structure or a volume structure. I think the challenge is with these long list of per word rates for each language pair. This has to stop. We have to move to packaging and simplification, simplification, simplification. I think what vendors miss is that when they're applying to an RFP or were invited to participate in an RFP, there are 5-6 other vendors participating, and they have to differentiate themselves. So if they make things complicated for the procurement team to skim over the data and the pricing, that's a missed opportunity, and they're going to be shortlisted out, not in. So if you must charge per word, at least package per region or provide a single per word rate across the board, if you can afford it. Now, when it comes to tech services, I go back to the new generation mindset. It's all about subscription. It's all about good, better, best scenario. It's all about simplify things to me in one line and in less than 40 characters so I can make a decision. So when you come through with a good, better, best scenario subscription process to leverage our technology, and oh, by the way, add-ons are for extras, that will give you an edge as a vendor.
That's very, very interesting. Of course, your suggestion of a strategic or building strategic partners for vendors is what a lot of people are doing. But what does that really mean when AI handles the execution? How does that change things?
Is AI really handling the execution?
That's a good question.
I think it's a misconception. Vendors are still handling the execution of AI, or the clients are handling the AI execution, but you need a human in the loop at the end of the day, or a level of governance or a governance nucleus, whether on the client side or on the vendor side, to handle this execution. So I don't see AI competing at the execution level. It is competing at the services level. How many services are still relevant versus not?
That's very interesting, because differentiation was going to be my next topic. How should vendors talk about AI without sounding interchangeable in essence?
As I mentioned earlier, there are plenty of good tools out there, solid vendors, solid companies. So I think the differentiation is going to be at the narrative and mindset level. It is not going to be at the services level, because they're all quite similar. And clients and procurement teams are not very well versed in localization, or at least most of them are not well versed in localization. So they think they're comparing apples to apples, and they should, because the RFP process or the questions are standardized. So it gets you to a certain point where the answers are also quite similar. But the agencies or the vendors or the providers that stand out are the ones who possess a better narrative and come across as not just the master of the trades or having the best technology out there, but they've done enough due diligence to understand the pain points of the clients, and they tied their solution or their value prop to their pain points. And these are the vendors that stand out in a very complex RFP process where you have all of the big players participating, basically.
Storytelling is becoming ever more important. Do we agree on
Oh,
that?
absolutely. Absolutely. Storytelling, it was always important. And it's not just in localization. It's any professional need to develop storytelling skills at every stage of their career because it's the power of relatability. When people relate to you, they're curious. When they're curious, it creates engagement. Engagement leads to call to action. Storytelling is key in localization, and it's been a struggle. Believe it or not, throughout my career, I would say 50% of my time coaching and nurturing the team on how to master the narrative of the audience, how to understand the audience before even going into a room and presenting, and how to listen more than speak. Because it is essential. And I think we've been successful in earning executive sponsorship and large budgets and rapport, not because we were super smart or hardworking, but because we spoke the language of the audience.
I'm doing something right. I'm becoming a better listener, interviewing people. It's forcing me to listen to interesting people like yourself. What capabilities matter more now than scale or speed, in your opinion?
I think we just touched on this earlier. It's storytelling
Yeah.
and um, and really emotional intelligence. How to read a room, and surprisingly, a good fair or good percentage of my business now is on represent workshops for coaching and nurturing both vendors and localization teams on the buyer side who need to earn executive sponsorship and rapport and navigate the corporate world. Again, I do think that we have a strong landscape of vendors and tools out there. The localization industry did a good job catching up with AI, and we continue to evolve every quarter. But what's missing is the storytelling side of things and how to package the solutions in a way that clicks with the executive leadership because they're going to sign off on the budget or they're not.
Yeah. Why do executives struggle to understand the impact of localization so much, in your opinion? And how can we make it easier for them to understand?
Well, in terms of responsibility and accountability, I think we take the blame for that because localization people are not storytellers. They're great professionals and operation folks, but presentation and narrative is not their forte. So walking
Not,
into a
not all
room
localized,
and
not all localization people. Don't generalize too much. Sorry.
sure, no, it's in general.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I interrupted you. That was rude of me.
No, not at all. But you make a very good point. We shouldn't be generalizing. But in my experience, I would say, in most cases, localization professionals like to execute, and the
Mm.
metrics that they provide are accurate, but are they relevant? And this is, I think, where the challenge is. Leaders would want to listen to anything that is relatable and that would justify an investment. So when we walk into a room and we understand who is in the room in terms of roles and responsibilities and build our narrative around their pain points, we get their attention. When we get their attention, then there's engagement and a call to action towards the end. So I think if we do a good job in terms of presenting the business case and how it impacts business growth and not present localization as a support function but a growth lever, that will help us uh, earn executive sponsorship and rapport. and build small wins internally that would lead to a long-term compounding effect and buy-ins internally.
Yeah, it's so tempting to walk into a C-suite meeting with dashboards. What stories resonate more than dashboards, in your opinion?
Dashboards are good because the leaders want to see metrics, but
Mm.
what really clicks with leaders, in my experience, are stories around competitors. So if you walk into a room and you have already done your due diligence and you studied your audience and you know who is in that room, and tailor the story around what your competitor is doing and why they're doing better in a certain area, that's your shock and awe statement. You made an entrance right there and you got their attention. Then we can talk metrics. But comparisons at the competitive level work very well. Stories about customer experience. For example, when you share with the leadership a story, you were at a show, you met with a customer, and they made that statement, and it stayed with you, and it made you think about how we can address it in localization. You come across as a strategic person, a thought leader who's leveraging experiences outside of the radius of localization, and you're suggesting areas of improvement that could have been blind spots for the leadership. But I wouldn't discount dashboards because leaders want to see numbers, but the relevant dashboards. So let's say if you're addressing an audience of compliance, then your dashboard must cover governance, fines, due diligence. If you're addressing the marketing team, you want to focus on engagement rates, clicks, traffic to the website. Again, it's all about the power of relevance and relatability.
Awesome. That's very solid advice. I think one of the other things that I hear all the time is how localization should be presented as a growth lever, not some kind of insurance. But how do you position localization like that best, in your opinion?
By not presenting it as a support function. When we walk in all the time and talk about how great our workflows are, and you have a chart of 20 steps workflow and it's working great, this is you're reducing it into a support function and you're capping the business. But when we present localization as a growth opportunity, because the minute we started localizing, for example, in Indonesia, we experienced growth in sales by X, or the minute we stopped localizing in a certain market, sometimes working by elimination is the best KPI, you demonstrate that the absence of localization in a certain market impacted business and impacted sales. And that's a very good indicator of the growth aspect to localization, and not just being a shared service type of a function across the organization. But again, it all goes down to the narrative.
Yeah.
How are we presenting it? Are we proud of our support as a support function and focused on workflows and processes, or are we casting a wider net and focusing on the behaviors in market because of localization?
So many of the LSPs are becoming tech providers, as well as you've indicated. How can we present AI as something else than just a cost story only, and avoid falling into that trap as language service providers?
You know, most leaders or most buyers are not looking at AI as a cost story. It's like a magic wand.
Yeah.
They leverage AI and go to the team and say, with AI, you're going to be able to do this and this and that. Show me the how. So, and this is where it's on the localization team to first be flexible and validate. Validation is very important when you're addressing the leadership. Yes, of course, it is great, and we can implement it. Here are the scenarios, but we need to add some guardrails through humans in the loop. So by validating and being open and flexible, and then walking them through the process that you've done your due diligence and you know how it's going to work in your specific area, but you still need a human in the loop, you're justifying whatever cost they're spending, but you're also protecting your current infrastructure. And sometimes we have to face it that roles will be eliminated, or you'll have to shift gears. So moving team members from one function to the other, or upskilling. Upskilling is super important. And I think people are super busy right now that they're forgetting about upskilling. But if you have the talent on the team, it's easier to upskill and move them to different roles than to have to figure out what new role you're going to have to post online and hire for. And it's a lot more expensive to hire new talent than leveraging pre-existing talent who are already very well versed with the company and organization, and they're top performers. All they need is an opportunity to upskill and develop.
Yeah. Maybe one last question, Wada, if I may be so bold. What's one question leaders should be asking nowadays, but rarely do? Oh, I'm stumping you for a second there.
Okay, that's a curveball. But here, I would say leaders should be asking, what are we doing today that we can't measure? What are the things that we continue to do that we can't measure?
Very well.
Because there are plenty of them.
Yeah.
And we just repeat them because it's a stagnant state of affairs, and we've been doing this for a long time, so why not continue to do them? During my time at Zendesk, we used to call it killing your darlings. We had an exercise that we used to do as a team twice a year, and it was a simple exercise: keep, kill, change. And we would go over the workflows and the daily steps and everything that we're doing. And it was such a revealing exercise, because when you're going through the daily grind daily, you don't realize what you need to stop or change or add. So pausing and thinking about what you're doing that you can't measure and try to shift gears, I think, is needed, because we've moved from soon enough to real time in terms of evolution. And it's not about yearly business reviews anymore. It's really at the quarterly level.
Very well. I think that's really great advice. It's always a pleasure talking to you and learning from you, Wada. I really enjoy this conversation. Hope we can do it again soon. And thank you for your time and dedication to the localization industry. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be with you as always.